I mean, let's start there, shall we, on this disturbing story. Axel Rudakubana unexpectedly pleading guilty yesterday to all charges. This was the first day of the hearing. He admitted the murder of 3 young girls, further attempted murder charges and terror-related offences. Sir Keir Starmer said in a statement this morning that he knew in the wake of the Southport attack that he had previously been referred to the counter-extremism prevent. So let's have a little listen to what Mr Starmer had to say.
Yes, I knew the details as they were emerging. That is the usual practice in a case such as this. But you know and I know that it would not have been right to disclose those details. The only losers, if the details had been disclosed, would be the victims and the families, because it ran the risk the trial would collapse.
Steve, I mean, he's right on that point, isn't he?
He's right in the general terms, right? This is why we have our contempt of court laws, and there are cases where cases have collapsed because of things that have been in the media. We know we've all been sent on the courses before you're allowed anywhere near TV or radio. Yep. For good reason, because what you don't want to do is say something that makes you, oh, look at me, I'm Mr. Big Tough Talk, and then some lawyer brings it up, look what's already been in the media, my client can't get a fair trial, off you trot. You don't want something like that happening. However, that's not always what we're talking about here. There must have been some information that could have been made public that in no way could have impacted the trial. Do you know the information of his place of birth? That could have come out because, like day one of a trial, the first thing that you have to do is like agree to what is your name. You confirm your name and address. Yeah. So it's not like that's ever the contentious bit of a trial. And if we would have been given that information straight out the traps, then whoever set fire to a hotel with migrants in it were clearly on a different path, because that couldn't have been related to the case that everyone was upset about. So there would have been a clearer division between those who wanted to protest saying, look, some kids have died or we need to do something. As it turns out, we now know we need to do something about the prevent system. But at the time, emotions were high, and then this rumour circles around on social media. Of course, we could have had some authority. You're right, it doesn't have to be the Prime Minister. He's meant to be busy unless it's after 6 o'clock on a Friday. But someone could have come out and said, look, we know this thing's going around on social media. We can say it is false, because that bit of information won't impact the outcome of a trial. I just think he was too much of a lawyer. He was thinking, I can keep all the information, we'll have a great trial, not realising how it would impact people who were feeling very emotional, and look what happened.
But does that mean then that if he'd have come out and said, you know, this is an asylum seeker who came across the channel 2 years ago, would that mean that all those people writing would have been legitimised in some kind of way? It would have been OK to set fire to things?
No, you're right. I'm never in favour of setting fire to hotels. I'll give you that. Yeah. But it would have been clearer blue water between what you think you're doing, why you are wrong. That would have had some clarity on that. And it would have separated out the two groups. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, because whenever this gets discussed, people like to do the false dichotomy thing of flipping to whichever side of the argument's going to give you most emotional points. So if you say, well, some far-right people like the idea of setting fire to a hotel. So the response is often, are you calling all of these people far-right, including the mothers who were upset about the young kids? Of course not. Within one set of people, there are subsets, and knowing who we were talking about would have separated out those two sets. So anyone wanting to do a protest about it, as I still believe now, is absolutely valid. What you don't want is right-wing people within that group who've got other motives getting the cover, getting the protection of being grouped up with people who had valid points.
I mean, there's many other facets to this as well. You know, Keir Starmer talking about, you know, the failure to prevent the murders by this man leaps off the page, and the case should be a line in the sand. Now, of course, this predates his government. I don't know how many times you have to be referred to prevent, how many times you have to kick off. We know this man had a violent past in other areas, his former school. This guy, I think the term loners and misfits was used by Keir Starmer. This is exactly this man, but a violent loner and a violent misfit, clearly, and it was quite evident he had that intent. I mean, that is a failure, right? That's a failure in our system. We seem to hear it all the time. I've lost count of how many terror attacks there's been when someone had gone, oh, they were known to the police.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that you can go through the prevent system a couple of times. I don't want to make too light of it, but I'm here to be vaguely glib, I suppose. I don't even like those stories when people pass their driving test on the 11th time, because I think you probably shouldn't be driving. If you failed that many times and passed on the 11th, you shouldn't be on the roads.
Yeah. The Daily Mail normally have a front page spread on that. You know, Muriel passes her driving test at 86, having tried 94 times. And you think, yeah, Muriel should not be in the same postcode as a car, let alone driving
Exactly.
one.
So if you've been through the prevent system a couple of times and you keep coming back, why are we not taking the hint? I mean, that doesn't mean I know what the solution is.
Yeah.
But the solution isn't, let's wait until, you know, maybe the 11th one's the charm. No, that needs looking at. And hopefully that is what will be looked at.
Yeah. And it's important as well to distinguish between protesters and rioters, I think. You know, there were some people who sensed, and that might have been misplaced, might have been completely inaccurate, but there was a sense that, you know, something is wrong. You know, 3 kids, 3 little girls had been killed, 10 others almost killed, others maimed for life. No one in that room's ever going to forget this day. It's understandable people would be angry about that, and some of the people who took to the streets wouldn't have been there to throw anything, just really to show, you know, that something's wrong with our system when this kind of thing can happen.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago since we were talking about the right to protest, because it's been slightly impacted, hasn't it? The Tories brought in restrictions, and I would have been on places like here saying the right to protest is one of the most fundamental, because when something else changes, what are you going to do about it if you can't protest? So the right to protest is very important. Even if you were wrong, you've got the right to protest. And as it turns out now, the protesters weren't wrong. There is, you know, questions need to be answered.
Let's move across the pond where nothing bad is going to happen for the next 4 years, because the Donald is back. He's been sworn in. We covered it all yesterday. 47th President of the US following his inauguration. He's planned to sign hundreds of executive orders in the first few days. Let's have a listen to what he said.
Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense.
Common sense. It's a phrase we use a lot. What's interesting about that is watching Joe Biden sitting right behind him as he's talking about the absolute carnage of the previous 4 years, and moves forward with a new beginning. But that's his intent. What do you think?
Yeah, it was awkward, isn't it? There were bits in that where I was thinking, mate, he sat right there. But Joe seems to be absolutely fine with it, because I guess he must have been sat there thinking, I don't know who this president is he's talking about, but whoever he was must have made a right mess of this. So when he finds out, he's going to be gutted. Yeah. But, I mean, look, at least he stopped some of the insults. Donald Trump normally puts the insult as like an adjective before the person's name, you know, crooked Hillary. He didn't call him Sleepy Joe, which is surprising, because I think he was
that would have been something, wouldn't it, if he literally had said, you know, this idiot behind me has been there for 4 years. I can't see what he's done. No, I can.
Call it Sleepy Joe, and it cuts to Joe, and he's like this. Oh, that would have been fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah. Look, I mean,
dinner time. It's 11 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoyed this speech. I'm not a Trump guy. And I should be allowed to say that. And I think it's going to be an interesting time. It doesn't matter which way it goes. Either he will end up being the caricature that the Democrats make out of him, and that's what we need to see. You need to let them have a good crack at it. Or some of these things will work. The problem is, there are 2 types of people in this world: those who think that everything Donald Trump does is bad, and those who think that everything he does is right, and they're both wrong. Which means there are 3 types of people in this world, because there's also me, so I was wrong before. Absolutely. But it does mean, it's getting confusing now, isn't it? Like, no one can be right all the time or wrong all the time. Even Jesus made mistakes, I presume. Like when he turned water into wine, that water was the water that was used to clean people's feet. And someone must have said, like, mate, just this fresh over there.
We've got some fresh stuff out the back.
Yeah.
What are you using?
I'm driving, so it's fine.
That's the footwell. No.
Yeah.
The good stuff's there.
So I think, I mean, that's going to happen. There will be stuff that Donald Trump does that's a good move.
True.
And people who have fundamentally died, all the way through to the core, hating what he does. You just look, Donald Trump doesn't like war. You don't have to be pro-war now just because you don't like Donald Trump. I guess I am asking for common sense. Maybe that's the right phrase.